Welcome back. Okay, so news of the day, and we start off with Department of Player Safety again. Shane Gostisbehere has a hearing for what happened last night after the empty net goal on Friedman, and it was just Friedman scores the empty netter, and then he hits him, and it's one of those, yeah, that's it. It's like a Dale Hunter, but only 5% of what Dale Hunter did. Dale Hunter got what 21 games, so that'd be a game, I guess. And so yeah, the thing is, all the Department of Player Safety talk over the last forever. It's interesting because the Department of Player Safety is there for what reason? It's in the title, player safety, and it doesn't often feel like the decisions are necessarily about player safety because I don't feel like players are necessarily safer now than they were when Department of Player Safety came in. And then there's a matter of, is there deterrents that are in these suspensions? I would say, I honestly, I don't think there's enough deterrent there. So Gostisbehere is probably going to get a game. I would say I can't see it being more than that. Friedman was not hurt on the plate, luckily. Could have broken his leg, right? He could have gone head first. All these things could have happened. He didn't. And that's part of the equation, too. I really think in the offseason, the NHL, and I know people want to get mad at George Peros, and that's an easy target, but I think they need to rethink the department and what it's supposed to do. And I don't know if that involves scaling it back. I honestly, I would take it right off social media, just personally, because social media should never be driving that conversation. It should be the league saying, here's our safety protocol, here's what we have in place, and here's the rules, and have it clear. One thing with Wilson knows what he's allowed to do and what he's not. And I've seen articles about that in the last 24 hours too. Like, yeah, Wilson knows. In this situation, I can do this and not worry. In this situation, I can't, so I'd better hold up and not do that. And so the NHL just needs to really get this all figured out because the whole spin in the wheel and all this, and it's just, yeah, they've got to figure this out in the off season. And again, I'd like to see a situation where it's actually a deterrent, if that's possible, because a lot of this is heat of the moment stuff. There's always whataboutism. It's always there. And it goes back in sports. I would imagine it goes back centuries. I would imagine half of the caveman drawings you see around the world are some guy going, and then this man, and then this woolly mammoth did this, and this one's a dick because he did this, and well, what about you? You did this, and so you look and you go, wow, this is all beautiful, and in reality, it was just two cavemen fighting over which one was a bigger prick with the woolly mammoths. So the NHL needs to stay just as far out of that as possible. The Rangers, of course, yesterday coming out with their statement, and I didn't do a video on it. Notice it's not on the board. Which is, there's two things with that. One, it's a way of letting the players know that they have their back. They're going to get fined for that, and right now somebody in NHL head office, I would think, is trying to figure out what kind of a fine they're going to levy against the Rangers. The San Jose Sharks in 2013 complained, and they got fined $100,000. For the Rangers, this is far more than that. I would think it's going to be a pretty costly fine for them, for the organization. But I understand the frustration too, and I think it needs to be a very simple, streamlined setup, and it needs to come back to just the core question in all this. There's two things with this. One, how are we going to make sure the league is as safe as possible for players? Understanding there's always going to be heat of the moment stuff that happens. And how do we make sure that we aren't in this situation where a team feels like, well, we've got to take this into our own hands? Because that's part of the reason Department of Player Safety exists, is because you would get into these ever-escalating arguments, feuds, and fights, and it would turn into your standard 80s bench clearing brawl. And there were people who loved the bench clearing brawls. They were fantastic. It was 20 minutes of guys coming off the bench and beating each other up, and every time the fights would settle down, you'd have brand new ones starting up. And guys would get hurt. So they have to ride that line. It has to be about player safety, but it also has to be about de-escalating these situations. And when you look at the talk around tonight's game between Washington and the Rangers, that hasn't happened. And I'm not talking about a suspension. I'm saying the NHL hasn't come out and said both these teams need to knock it off. Anything that happens tonight, we will be watching, so be careful. They haven't done it. They haven't done it. I don't understand why. Maybe they will between now and game time. But this is supposed to be what the Department of Player Safety is for. Is for players not to get injured and not to feel like they have to take the law into their own hands. And I've seen a league where that's the case, and it gets really ugly really fast. And the incidents that we've been talking about over the last few days will be nothing compared to what happens in the league when you end up with one where the players are like, oh, I guess we got to do this all by ourselves. And then, yeah. So I think it needs to be visited in the offseason, changing it. And just simple, player safety. There are things we see get suspended right now that are, how do I put this? They're not as dangerous as some of the things that the league will say is not suspension worthy. It's not my call on deciding what is or isn't. I'm just saying it's weird to me. Where I'll see a player, they're like, yep, this is a suspension. That one's a fine. And in my head, I'm going, but that one was way more dangerous than the one that was a suspension. And not wanting to set precedent seems kind of weird for Department of Player Safety. Because it's the Department of Player Safety. So, thankless job, too. I will agree, too, that it was at its peak when Brendan Shanahan was making those decisions. I really thought Brendan Shanahan did a pretty good job. I know there were still criticisms. I know there still are. But I thought Shanahan did a really good job there. But again, it's a thankless job. All right, moving on from that. Zach Hyman, Riley Nash, both on the ice for the Leafs today in non-contact jerseys. In Hyman's case, it's his first time he's been on the ice since the kneeing incident with Alex Edler. So Hyman's getting closer, and he should be good to go come playoff time. Toronto's in an interesting situation where they've got a lot of players. If everybody gets healthy, they have a lot of players, which over these playoffs, which it would appear are going to end up being kind of not as squashed as last year's playoffs, but it's going to be pretty tight. It could be good to have a really good amount of depth, comparatively speaking, with normal seasons. And even in normal seasons, you need a lot of depth, but this year, that could be the key to winning it all. Tyler Bertuzzi, who hasn't played for a while. We knew he wasn't coming back this season. He had back surgery on the 30th of April. He's expected to be back for the start of the 2021-2022 season. And, yeah, we'll see how things go for him. I like Bertuzzi. I think he's a good player. He's an agitator. He's another one of those players that rides that line. And I could see him at some point in time crossing that line and becoming one of the most hated players in the National Hockey League. But, you know, I think for Detroit, good top six forward. Does give you that sandpaper. Hopefully he's healthy and good to play in the fall. St. Louis, so Blues. Sammy Blais is out for tonight. Tarasenko will now miss his third game in a row. And again, it's that they're not really saying a whole lot. Just that he's out, not how long he's going to be out. And in Tarasenko's case, this is just, it's another game, it's another injury, it's another situation that really makes you wonder how many more years Tarasenko has left. Can he be healthy in the fall? Can he play an 82-game schedule? Or is he going to be one of these guys who maybe plays 50 in a season? Is his goal scoring ever going to come back? Like, there's a lot of question marks around Tarasenko right now. That's why I think the whole expansion draft is going to be fascinating, because players like that, you see a player is injured, maybe he's got a really expensive contract. As a GM, if you can protect a young player and leave a contract like that out and go, well, if that's what we're going to lose, you know, and as Seattle, are you going to take a chance on a guy who's injured regularly and makes a ton of money? I would argue probably no. So expansion draft is going to be really, really interesting. Vegas news. Pacioretty will be out tonight. It's undisclosed on what's going on with Pacioretty. And they do expect Ryan Reeves to be back in time for the playoffs. He's missed a lot of action lately. It completely changes Vegas's game without Reeves, too. When I look at the hits totals at the end of the night, I'm like, man, you can really see that Ryan Reeves isn't playing in these games. They're getting out hit a lot. And it's one of those aspects of the game that, you know, you can take for granted. I know that hits are often overlooked a bit. And I know I've downplayed it myself that usually the team that gets a lot of hits is one that doesn't have a lot of shots. But in Vegas's case, they can be both. They can be the team that has all the hits and all the shots. And a lot of that has to do with Reeves. Obviously, Carrier is a huge part of that too, but Reeves and Carrier together, pretty impressive duo when it comes to hitting. And so he comes back, it just changes that bottom six completely. On Capitals news, so Ovechkin's out. Oshie's back in for tonight. But again, for people who are like, I think this game's going to get really ugly. Which members of the Rangers are currently in a position to make this ugly? And I know they traded Lemieux. I don't think Lemieux would be the guy that would answer this either. Because the Capitals, it's not just Wilson. They have Zdeno Chara, they have Garnet Hathaway, and they have Brendan Dillon. They are perfectly capable of handling themselves, regardless of which line's on the ice, because two of those guys are defensemen, two of them are forwards. And so, yeah, if I'm coaching the Caps tonight, I'm making sure that one of those players is on the ice as often as possible, because there's not a lot the Rangers can really do. Again, I know there's a lot of people expecting a war. The Rangers would lose that war. They do not have the players that are capable of doing what they want. And I know people are going to say, well, they'll just target the stars. Well, A, Ovechkin's out, and B, I don't know that they necessarily do, because they don't really have that. Like, the Islanders have that great fourth line, right, which plays like a third line, where you have Clutterbuck, you have Martin, you have Komarov. The Rangers don't really have a line that can play that style or do any of, like, they don't have that. It might be something that they want to fix in the offseason. But if this game gets ugly tonight, the Caps win it. If this game stays away from that, if the Rangers can just go out, play 60 minutes and just put that out of mind and say, maybe we'll think about it for next season. Maybe the first meeting of next season's kind of an uglier matchup. Maybe the Rangers have a chance of winning this tonight. The Rangers should be looking at tonight as a way to go out there and try to beat the Capitals and make it harder for them to end up finishing first in the division. Now, I also wanted to talk about Anders Bjork. He's been playing very well for Buffalo, featuring prominently with them. So with Boston this year, he played 30 games, 2 goals and 3 assists for them in Boston. Not a great fit in Boston. It just was not working out. In Buffalo so far, he's played 13 games. He has 3 goals and 3 assists for 6 points. And he's only a -1 on a team that allows a lot of goals, right? So Bjork's had a good run with Buffalo, and it'll be interesting to see where they slot him for next season. I don't know about top 6, but I think as a third-line energy forward, I think he would work perfectly well for them. But it's been interesting because everybody will focus on Hall and how the Bruins have played since that trade. I would also look at Buffalo and say, you know what, they haven't been as bad since the trade deadline as people might have expected. They weren't as bad going into the trade deadline as was being made out to be either. And Bjork's been a good pickup for a guy in Taylor Hall that was not coming back anyways. He's a UFA this summer. And yeah, I think that could be low-key a pretty good pickup for them. So, and I'm happy for him. I am. When guys leave the Bruins and they do well somewhere else, looking at Frankie Vetrano and Noel Acciari as examples, I'm happy for him. I am. So, Bjork could be another Frankie Vetrano. When Frankie left Boston, not much was said about it. In fact, I remember Boston fans saying they didn't understand what I saw in him and why I was so high on the guy, because he's just another forward and there's nothing really there. And he's been great for Florida. So sometimes it's just a matter of a player finding the right city to play in. And I know I've been talking about doing a video on that. I will do a video on that. Players that didn't have the right fit the first time around, but when they got traded or they became a free agent, went somewhere else, it just clicked. And I can also do a video the other way around where a player had a really good run going, gets traded or becomes a free agent, and it just falls apart when they go somewhere else. All right, and I want to close off by just saying something in closing here about the Canucks, because there's been a lot of anger with Canuck fans. And it's interesting because we all kind of knew going into 19 games in 32 days that this could get ugly and it could spiral. And it's spiraling, and it's getting ugly. And last night, the Oilers really didn't have to work that hard to beat Vancouver. And it's kind of becoming a theme here where teams are just coming in and just beaten Vancouver. You can just chalk that up as an automatic 2 points. But I don't want I don't like how. All right, how do I put this? I wouldn't read too much into the losing streak. I wouldn't read too much into the stats of the players during this losing streak. And I wouldn't read too much into players that are making mistakes because, it's their ninth game in 15 days or 16 days. It's just, it does tend to kind of go out of control. And I think for the Canucks, it's not as bad as it looks right now. It's probably not as good as some Canuck fans may have thought it was coming out of the playoffs against Vegas last year. But they'll probably land somewhere in the middle. And if they make the right moves this summer, and I know there's lots of complaints about what kind of moves the GM's going to make and why is he still GM? But if they make the right moves this summer, they should be competitive when it comes to a playoff spot in the Pacific Division this year. And of course, when they end up finishing behind Seattle, and that's how they miss the playoffs, I'll be here to report on it then. That's my expectation, is that the Canucks end up being right in the running for a wild card spot, and they lose it to Seattle, and that's when all the happiness begins. All right, there you go. News of the day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I would do a video strictly on the player safety side of things, but I've already done that, and so I'm kind of at a loss at this point. But we'll see. I'm predicting it's going to be a game for Ghost because Friedman wasn't hurt on the play. He jumped right back up, thankfully, and it was just a moment of passion kind of thing, I guess, just an angry thing that he did. It wasn't premeditated, not that I saw. All right, but let me know your thoughts. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And no, there wasn't anything else tweeted out today. Nothing else that happened last night had any kind of anything attached to it. No fines, no suspensions, no flowers, no ice cream, nothing. All right, thank you guys for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.